Where the land meets the sea, there is a zone of constant change. The movement of the tides, strong winds and coastal currents are continually moving the sand on the beaches. Those who live near the coast accept this cycle of beach conditions as part of life. When a cyclone hits the coastline, the whole foreshore area inevitably suffers enormous damage. Recovery of the beaches can take months or even years. Over longer periods of time, there are other changes taking place that are much more subtle and can go unnoticed. In the surf zone, sand is held in suspension by turbulence of the waves and is constantly being moved northward by what is known as the littoral drift. It is estimated that about 500,000 cubic metres is moved like a river of sand along our beaches each year. Over time, nature has been working this system well, keeping our beaches nourished with a plentiful supply of clean white sand. Then man came along and in his wisdom decided to build rock walls at the mouth of the Tweed River in the 1960s in an attempt to keep it navigable. The result was that the natural drift of sand was interrupted. In a few years, the beaches at Greenmount and Kura became so starved of sand they were almost non-existent. Millions of dollars were spent using dredges to move the sand on past the walls at the Tweed River mouth to save these beaches, while a permanent solution was found. Eventually, an expensive bypass system was built, and for a while, everyone was happy. Then there was too much sand. The safe swimming bays were gone. The offshore reefs were covered, and the surfboard riders lost their ultimate way. Similar rock walls were built at the entrance to Tellabudgera and Currumbin Creeks for the same reason. But again, silting has become a big problem, and they have to be constantly dredged. A look back at historical photos can often reveal how nature has made changes to our coastline that have gone almost unnoticed. In 1840, the Nerang River entered the sea about where Surfers Paradise is today. Early photos show the river mouth continued to move north, and by 1924 was near the present site of SeaWorld. The seaway entrance moved north at a rate of approximately 60 metres a year, eroding the southern end of Stradbroke Island and progressively building the spit. Many times the entrance was completely blocked with sand. Eventually, in 1986, rock walls were constructed to lock in a safe entrance to the Broadwater, while Wavebreak Island was built to protect the mainland from storm surge. A sand bypass system was built to help nature move that river of sand north onto South Stradbroke Island. Before the 1920s, there were huge sandhills behind the beach at Coolangatta. Strong northerly winds constantly blew the sand over roads and property. Eventually this sand was moved to fill swampland in what is now Goodwin Park, which became a popular camping spot in the 1930s. There was dense scrub in a swamp behind similar sandhills on Rainbow Bay, which was also filled to eradicate a mosquito problem. In the early days there were 2 freshwater lakes where the township of Burleigh Heads now stands. The local Kumbamerri Aboriginal tribes used these lakes for their freshwater supply. During the 1920s, Burleigh Heads was discovered by holidaymakers, and the lakes were gradually filled in. The one near the beach became a popular camping ground. Our coastal region has been studied by scores of researchers and geologists who have looked way back in time to reveal a truly astonishing story. Looking at a map of the Gold Coast today, it is hard to relate it to what a map of the coastline could have looked like about 120,000 years ago. The coastline was back into Nerang, Mudgeeraba, Burleigh Waters, Palm Beach and the Gold Coast Airport. At this time, the rising seas had brought in huge quantities of sand from the continental shelf. During a succession of ice ages that followed, which caused the sea levels to fall, powerful winds from the southeast blew incessantly and shaped the sand into huge dunes and sand blows that formed the beaches that we know today, as far north as Fraser Island. Then, by about 18,000 years ago, after this constant succession of ice ages, the sea had receded to the extent that the coastline was approximately 35 kilometres out to sea from where Surfers Paradise is today. At this time, the landscape of this coastal area was thought to be a fairly flat plain. No doubt there were many wetlands and streams. Soundings taken by the State Fisheries in 1978 show that there were small canyons that were likely outfalls for the ancient rivers, probably extensions of today's Nerang and Tweed river systems. Prominent headlands like Burleigh would have been just notable hills extending down to the plains. Coming forward from about 18,000 to 6,000 years ago, the succession of ice ages stopped. The earth began to warm and the sea levels again rose steadily. By some estimations, quite rapidly at times, between 1 and 2.5 metres each century. It is thought Aboriginal tribes could have been living along this coastline during this time. In just a few generations, this rate of territory loss would have been the subject of great concern to them. The coastline eventually reached a position where the sea inundated an area from Nerang through Mudgeeraba to Burleigh. This had the effect of creating a huge swamp in this area, with grasses, sedges and paperbark trees. Evidence of this swamp and the low-lying region is still there. A small ice age about 3,000 years ago repositioned the shoreline to about where it is today. Extensive research has painted a fairly reliable picture of the distant history of our coastline. But one thing is certain, nothing stays the same. Whatever your thoughts are on climate change, global warming, or concerns about rising levels of the world's oceans, this story should enter into the equation. Remember, each day is just another point in time as we move through evolution.